Senna didn't know the man watching from the throne was the Alpha King. She didn't know he'd ordered every unwed woman in the kingdom brought before the cursed crown, growing more desperate with each failure. And she definitely didn't know that when her fingers touched the cold metal, it would awaken something ancient inside her, something that had been sleeping for 300 years. All she knew was that her feet hurt, her stomach was empty, and if one more guard shoved her forward, she was going to bite him. The great hall of Valdrin Keep was nothing like the stories. Senna had imagined gold and glory, banners rippling in perfumed air. Instead, she found chaos. Women packed the chamber shoulder to shoulder, merchants' daughters in their finest silks, farmers' girls in patched wool, noble women who looked furious at being made to stand beside commoners. The air smelled of sweat, fear, and something else. Something sharp and metallic that made Senna's teeth ache. Magic. Old magic. The kind her grandmother had warned her about before she died. "Move forward," the guard behind her barked. Senna shuffled with the rest, craning her neck to see past the taller women ahead. At the front of the hall, on a pedestal carved from black stone, sat the crown. It wasn't beautiful. That was her first thought. She'd expected jewels, gold filigree, and the kind of craftsmanship that took a master artisan decades to complete. Instead, the crown was brutal, forged from dark iron, twisted into shapes that hurt to look at directly. Thorns circled the band, and at its center, a single blood-red stone pulsed with dim light, like a heartbeat, like it was alive. "Next," a voice called. A young woman in yellow silk approached the pedestal. She was trembling, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying. The crowd held its breath as she reached out. The moment her fingers brushed the iron, she screamed. Not pain. Terror. Pure animal terror that ripped from her throat as she stumbled backward, collapsing into the arms of waiting servants. They carried her away, still whimpering, and Senna's blood ran cold. Next. Another woman. Another scream. This one didn't even touch it. She got within a hand's width before her eyes rolled back and she crumpled. Next. And so it went. Woman after woman approached the cursed crown, and woman after woman fell. Some screamed, some simply collapsed. One laughed hysterically until the guards dragged her out. The pile of unconscious bodies near the side door grew larger. 312 women. That's how many Senna counted before the crowd finally thinned enough for her to see the throne. He sat motionless, carved from shadow and silence. Dark hair fell across a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so cold, so utterly devoid of expression. His eyes, even from this distance she could see they were pale, ice blue, the color of frozen lakes in deep winter. Those eyes swept over the remaining women with something that looked like despair. Next. The woman beside Senna whimpered and ran. Suddenly, there was no one between her and the pedestal. The crown pulsed, that slow heartbeat rhythm, and Senna felt something strange. A pull, like a hook behind her navel, tugging her forward. "Approach," the guard commanded. "I'd rather not." Silence. The kind of silence that falls when someone says something deeply stupid in front of very powerful people. "You refuse?" The voice came from the throne, low, rough-edged, carrying an authority that pressed against her skin like a physical weight. Senna lifted her chin. "I'm a healer's apprentice from Thornwick. I set bones and mix poultices. Whatever this crown does, I promise you, I'm not what you're looking for." The Alpha King leaned forward, and suddenly those pale eyes were fixed entirely on her. The weight of his attention was suffocating. "Then you have nothing to fear. Touch it, confirm what we both apparently believe, and you're free to return to your bone setting." Something in his voice made her pause. Beneath the command, beneath the cold authority, she heard it. Exhaustion. The kind that went bone deep. This man had watched 300 women fall today. How many yesterday? How many the day before? "And if I'm not what you're looking for?" she asked quietly. Will I wake up screaming like the others? The crown reveals truth. His jaw tightened. If you're not my mate, you'll feel nothing but cold iron. The others. He paused. The others had something to hide. Senna thought about that. Thought about the yellow silk girl, the laughing woman, the hundreds who'd fallen. What secrets had the crown dragged from them? And what secrets was she carrying? Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. You have your mother's gift, child. Keep it buried. Never let them see. But her mother was dead. Her grandmother was dead. She'd spent 23 years hiding something she didn't even understand, and she was tired. Fine. Senna stepped forward. But if I collapse, I expect someone to catch me. The crown waited. Up close, it was worse. The iron seemed to writhe, the thorns sharper than any metalwork should be. That red stone pulsed faster now, almost eager. Senna reached out. Her fingers brushed the iron. Cold. Bitter, burning cold that shot up her arm and wrapped around her heart. She gasped, bracing for the terror, for the screaming, for whatever nightmares had claimed the others. But the nightmare never came. Instead, she heard a voice, ancient, female, echoing from somewhere deep inside her own chest. Finally, I've been waiting for you. The crown lifted. Not by her hand. She hadn't gripped it, hadn't tried to move it. But the twisted iron rose from the pedestal, hovering before her like it was bowing. The great hall erupted into chaos. And on the throne, the Alpha King rose slowly to his feet, his frozen eyes blazing with something that looked terrifyingly like hope. Senna couldn't move. The crown hovered inches from her face, rotating slowly, that blood-red stone pulsing in rhythm with her own heartbeat. The voice in her chest had gone silent, but she could feel it waiting, an ancient presence, coiled and patient. Impossible. A woman's voice, sharp with disbelief. She's nobody, a peasant. The crown doesn't lie, Lady Morgaine. The Alpha King descended from the dais, each step measured and deliberate. The crowd parted for him like water around stone. In 300 years, no one has been able to lift it. Not queens, not witches, not the most powerful she-wolves in the realm. He stopped an arm's length from Senna, close enough that she could see the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw. Up close, he looked less like a king and more like a man held together by sheer will. What's your name? Senna. Senna Voss. Senna. He said it like he was tasting the syllables, memorizing them. I'm Varen. I know who you are. Do you? Something flickered in those pale eyes. Not amusement exactly, but something close. Then you know what this means. Senna looked at the hovering crown, at the unconscious women being carried from the hall, at the nobles whispering furiously behind their hands. It means your crown is broken. Varen's lips twitched. Almost a smile, but not quite. It means you're my mate. The word hit her like a physical blow. Mate. The bond that wolves whispered about in reverent tones, that her grandmother had described as both blessing and curse, a connection so deep it transcended choice, so powerful it could... No. The whispers stopped. Someone dropped a goblet. The clatter echoed through the suddenly silent hall. Varen's expression didn't change. No, I don't know you. I don't want to be queen. I don't even believe in... She gestured wildly at the floating crown. Whatever this is, I'm a healer's apprentice. I grow herbs and lance boils and hold people's hands while they die. I'm not anyone's mate. The crown disagrees. Then the crown is wrong. Varen studied her for a long moment. Behind him, the noble called Lady Morgaine was practically vibrating with outrage. Several guards had their hands on their swords. And still the crown hovered, patient as death. Take it, Varen said quietly. What? The crown. Take it in your hands. If you truly aren't my mate, it will reject you. You'll feel the cold and nothing more. Senna's heart slammed in her chest. The voice in her chest stirred. a whisper too faint to understand. Just take it. What's the worst that could happen? She reached out before she could talk herself out of it. The moment her fingers closed around the iron, the world caught fire. Not real fire. Nothing burned. Nothing hurt. But heat flooded through her, golden and overwhelming, and suddenly she could feel him, Varin. His exhaustion, his desperate hope, and his 3 years of searching for something he'd almost stopped believing existed. She felt his grief. Parents murdered. A kingdom on the brink of collapse. She felt his loneliness, cold and vast as the frozen lakes his eyes resembled. And beneath it all, she felt the pull. A bond snapping into place like a key finding its lock. Varen sucked in a sharp breath, his hand flying to his chest. When his eyes met hers, they were no longer cold. They were burning. You felt that? Senna whispered. Yes. What was it? You know what it was. She did. That was the terrifying part. Every instinct she possessed, every hidden part of her she'd spent 2 decades suppressing was screaming the same thing. Mate, yours, his, ours. I need to sit down, Senna said faintly. Varin caught her elbow before her knees buckled, his grip gentle but firm. The contact sent another jolt through her. Smaller this time, but no less electric. Clear the hall, he ordered, not looking away from her face. Chaos erupted. Nobles protesting, guards shouting, Lady Morgaine's voice rising above it all like a hawk's shriek. But within minutes, the great hall was empty except for the two of them, and the crown, still clasped in Senna's white-knuckled hands. You have questions, Varen said. Ask them. Why can I lift this? Why me? Because you're my true mate. The crown was forged to recognize her, to recognize you. It's been waiting 300 years for someone from your bloodline. My bloodline? Senna laughed, sharp and incredulous. I'm a nobody. My mother was a midwife. My grandmother was a... She stopped. Her grandmother had been something. Something she'd hidden. Something she'd made Senna swear to hide too. A what? Varen pressed gently. I don't know. Senna's voice cracked. She died before she could tell me. She said I had my mother's gift, that I had to keep it buried. Varen reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her jaw, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. Whatever gift you've been hiding, he said quietly, you don't have to hide it anymore. Not from me. The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. You don't know me, she whispered. I know the crown chose you. I know the bond is real. I felt it as clearly as you did. And I know. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I know I've been alone for a very long time, Senna, and I'm asking you, not commanding, asking, to give me 7 days. 7 days? Stay at Valdrin Keep. Let me show you what being my queen would mean. If after 7 days you want to leave, I'll let you go. I'll give you gold, lands, whatever you need to start over. No obligations, no chains. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. Senna looked at the crown in her hands, looked at the man before her, the Alpha King, feared throughout the realm, watching her with something vulnerable in his frozen eyes. 7 days. That was nothing. That was everything. And if I stay? She asked. Varen's thumb brushed her cheekbone, feather light. Then we figure out what this bond means. Together. The crown pulsed, warm now instead of cold. The voice in her chest hummed with approval. Against every instinct that had kept her alive, Senna nodded. 7 days. The castle swallowed her whole. Senna had expected cold stone and colder people. The kind of court her grandmother had whispered about, where smiles hid daggers, and kindness was currency spent only for advantage. Instead, she found warmth. Valdrin Keep sprawled across a mountain's shoulder like a sleeping beast, all dark towers and ancient walls. But inside, fires crackled in massive hearths, Tapestries softened the stone, and the people who passed her in corridors nodded with what looked like genuine respect. A woman named Bronwyn took charge of her. Silver-haired and sharp-eyed, she reminded Senna of her grandmother. If her grandmother had commanded a small army of servants. "His Majesty has arranged chambers in the East Wing," Bronwyn said, leading her through a maze of hallways. "Close to his own, but with a private entrance. He thought you'd want your independence." He thought right. Bronwyn's weathered face creased into something approaching a smile. "He also thought you'd say that." The chambers were larger than Senna's entire cottage in Thornwick, a bed piled with furs, windows overlooking snow-capped peaks, a copper tub already steaming with rose-scented water. On the dresser, she found fresh clothes, not servant's wool, but not noble silk either. Something in between, practical. Chosen by someone who'd paid attention. She bathed until the water went cold, scrubbing away the grime of travel and the lingering shock of the day. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it. The bond, humming beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. Varen's presence, somewhere in the castle, a constant pull at the edge of her awareness. What had she agreed to? The next morning, Varen came for her himself. He stood in her doorway, dressed simply in dark leather and linen, no crown, no regalia. Just a man asking if she'd walk with him. The formality of yesterday had cracked, revealing something rawer beneath. "I want to show you the vault," he said. "Where we keep the artifacts." Artifacts? Objects tied to the crown's magic. They've been dormant for centuries. He paused, and she saw uncertainty flicker across his face. "I think they might respond to you." The vault was buried deep beneath the keep, accessible only through a series of locked doors that required both key and blood to open. Varen pressed his palm to each seal, and Senna watched the iron drink his blood before swinging wide. "Cheerful security system," she muttered, "built during the war. My ancestors were paranoid. Can't imagine why." The vault itself was smaller than she expected. A circular chamber lit by blue flame torches that never flickered. Along the walls, shelves held dozens of objects: rings, daggers, mirrors, bones, scrolls, a child's wooden toy. Each item seemed to pulse with faint energy, like coals waiting to catch fire. "The crown is the keystone," Varen explained, "but these artifacts are connected to it. In the old days, the queen could use them, see visions, speak to the dead, even control the weather, according to some texts. But after Queen Morrigan died 300 years ago, they went dormant." Queen Morrigan. The name tugged at something in Senna's memory. The one who cursed the crown? Varen's expression shuddered. She didn't curse it. She enchanted it. Made it so only her descendants could wield its power. The curse is what came after. After what? After they killed her? The words hung in the air, heavy with old grief. Varen moved to a shelf and picked up a small hand mirror, its silver frame tarnished with age. This was hers. The mirror of truth. It's supposed to show the viewer what they most need to see. It hasn't worked in 3 centuries. He offered it to Senna. "Will you try?" She took the mirror carefully, half expecting the cold shock of the crown. Instead, the silver warmed against her palm, almost welcoming. "Just look into it?" That's how the stories say it works. Senna raised the mirror. For a moment, she saw only her own reflection, tired eyes, tangled hair, a woman who desperately needed more sleep. Then the glass rippled. The vision slammed into her like a fist, a great hall, different from the one where she'd lifted the crown. Older, rougher. Men in armor arguing around a table. A woman in chains, dark hair matted with blood, watching them with eyes that burned. "Kill her and be done with it," one man spat. "She's already poisoned the king's mind." "She's the queen," another protested. "We can't." "She's a witch, and her bloodline ends tonight." The woman in chains smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Senna had ever seen. My bloodline will outlast your bones, she whispered. And when my heir returns, she will burn your descendants' legacy to ash. The mirror's surface blazed white. Senna gasped, dropping the artifact. It clattered against the stone floor but didn't shatter. What did you see? Varen was beside her instantly, steadying her shoulders. Senna, what did you see? Queen Morrigan. Her voice shook. They were going to execute her. She said her heir would return. That she would burn. She stopped. The vision had shown her something else. Something she hadn't fully processed in the chaos of the moment. One of the men at that table, the one who'd advocated for the Queen's death, had worn a sigil on his cloak. A silver raven clutching a sword. The same sigil she'd seen on Lady Morgaine's brooch in the Great Hall. Senna? She looked up at Varen, her mind racing. Who is Lady Morgaine? His brow furrowed. A council member. Her family has served the crown for generations. They were instrumental in stabilizing the kingdom after Morrigan's death. His eyes sharpened. Why? Her ancestor was there. When they killed the queen? Senna swallowed hard. He was the one who wanted her dead. Varen went very still. You're certain? The mirror showed me. The same raven sigil. I saw it on her today. Silence stretched between them. When Varen finally spoke, his voice was ice. Lady Morgaine has spent the last 3 years advocating against the crown tests. She told the council it was superstition that I should marry for alliance instead of waiting for a mythical mate. His jaw tightened. But when I refused to abandon the search, she insisted on controlling where we looked. She's the one who pushed us toward the outer villages, toward Thornwick. The implication settled over Senna like a shroud. She was hunting for Morrigan's bloodline, Senna said slowly. Not to help you find your mate. To find your mate before you did. To eliminate the threat quietly. And when that failed? When you lifted the crown in front of the entire court? She looked furious. Senna finished grimly. I noticed. What does she want? Power. If I die without an heir, the throne passes to her bloodline. They have a distant claim through a bastard son from 4 generations back. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. But with you here, with the crown responding to you, her path to power is blocked. Senna thought about the woman's sharp eyes, the barely concealed rage. She's going to try to stop this, she whispered. Yes. Varen's grip tightened. Which is why, from this moment on, you don't leave my sight. The blue flames flickered, casting strange shadows across the vault. Somewhere in the castle above, a woman who had waited 3 centuries for her family's revenge was learning that her plans had just become very, very complicated. And Senna realized, with a chill that had nothing to do with the underground cold, that she'd just become the most dangerous piece on a board she didn't even know she was playing. The days blurred together in a rhythm Senna hadn't expected to find comfortable. Mornings, she worked with the artifacts. Each one responded to her touch differently. Some showed visions like the mirror, others whispered secrets, and one particularly unsettling bone fragment made her taste blood for an hour afterward. Varen was always there, catching her when the visions hit too hard, bringing her water and honey cakes when the magic left her drained. Afternoons, she explored the keep, the library with its towering shelves and dust moat light, the kitchens where the head cook slipped her warm bread and gossip in equal measure, the training yards where wolves sparred with savage grace and where she'd caught Varen watching her from the shadows more than once. She pretended not to notice. She noticed everything. On the 4th night, she found him in the tower observatory. The room sat at the keep's highest point, its domed ceiling made entirely of glass. Stars blazed overhead, so bright and close, Senna felt she could reach up and scatter them like seeds. Varen stood at the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. You should be sleeping, he said without turning. So should you. She moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel his warmth but not quite touching. Bronwyn said you haven't slept in 3 days. Bronwyn talks too much. Bronwyn cares about you. So does everyone in this castle. She paused. It's strange, actually. I expected them to hate you. That made him turn. Why? Because you're the Alpha King, because you're powerful and cold and terrifying. She shrugged. That's the reputation anyway. And now? Senna considered the question. She thought about how he'd held her hand when the bone fragment's vision left her sobbing. How he'd memorized which honey cakes she preferred and made sure they appeared at every meal. How he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't watching, like she was something precious and impossible. Now I think the reputation is armor, she said quietly. And I think you've been wearing it so long you've forgotten it's not your skin. Varen's breath caught. In the starlight, his pale eyes looked almost silver, and for once, they held no ice. You see too much, he murmured. Occupational hazard. Healer's apprentice, remember? We learn to read what people don't say. He moved closer. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. Close enough that she could see the faint scar beneath his left eye. The exhaustion he couldn't quite hide. The hunger he was trying desperately to control. Senna. Her name in his voice did something dangerous to her pulse. I need to tell you something. Then tell me. The bond. He stopped, started again. I've felt it since the moment you touched the crown. Every hour, every minute. It's like a fire in my chest that never stops burning. And I've been trying. I've been trying so hard to give you space. To let you choose. To not be the monster the stories say I am. But? His hand came up, fingers hovering a breath away from her cheek. But I'm running out of restraint, and if you don't want this, you need to tell me now, because in about 10 seconds I'm going to kiss you, and I'm not sure I'll be able to stop. Senna's pulse thundered in her ears, the bond roared inside her, a wildfire demanding fuel. What if I don't want you to stop? Varen's control shattered. He kissed her like a man drowning, his mouth hungry and desperate and achingly tender all at once. His hands cradled her face like she was something sacred, and Senna melted into him, her fingers fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer, closer, never close enough. The bond sang between them, golden and fierce, weaving them together in ways she couldn't begin to understand. She felt his heartbeat sink with hers, felt his emotions bleeding into her own, want, wonder, and beneath it all, a fear so profound it made her chest ache. He was terrified of losing her. She pulled back, breathing hard. Varen's forehead pressed against hers, his eyes still closed. Senna, I need time. The words hurt to say, but she forced them out. This is too much, too fast. The bond, the crown, the visions. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if what I feel is me or magic. Varen opened his eyes. The vulnerability there nearly undid her. What do you need? I need to know this is my choice. Not destiny, not enchantment, not 300-year-old magic deciding my life for me. She touched his face, tracing that faint scar. After this is over, after we deal with Morgaine and whatever she's planning, ask me again. And you'll say yes? I'll say what I actually feel, without the chaos, without the fear. She managed a shaky smile. That's all I can promise. Varen turned his head, pressing a kiss to her palm. The gesture was so gentle, so reverent, that tears pricked her eyes. Then I'll wait, he said roughly. However long you need. He walked her back to her chambers, their fingers intertwined the whole way. At her door, he kissed her forehead, soft, sweet, restrained, and left without another word. Senna leaned against the closed door, her heart racing, her lips still tingling. 3 more days. 3 more days, and then she'd have to decide. She prayed they both survived long enough for her to make that choice. The 5th morning started with screaming. Senna bolted upright in bed, disoriented, reaching for a weapon she didn't have. The door crashed open and Varen appeared, fully dressed, a sword in his hand and murder in his eyes. Get up. Now. What's happening? Morgaine moved faster than we expected. He grabbed her cloak and threw it around her shoulders, pulling her toward the door. The screaming had stopped, replaced by something worse, the clash of steel on steel echoing from somewhere below. The keep is under attack? Senna stumbled to keep pace with his long strides. Not attack. Coup. Varen's jaw was granite. Half my guard switched loyalties overnight. Morgaine's been planning this for months. She was just waiting for the right moment. What moment? You. He pulled her into an alcove as two men in Morgaine's silver raven livery ran past. The crown responding to you was the trigger. If she couldn't stop the bond from forming, she decided to eliminate us both before you could be crowned. Ice flooded Senna's veins. How do we get out? The vault. There's a passage that leads to the mountain's base. My ancestors built it for exactly this situation. He checked the corridor, then pulled her forward again. Bronwyn is gathering loyalists. We regroup, then we counter. They made it to the vault entrance before disaster found them. Lady Morgaine stood before the blood-sealed doors, flanked by a dozen armed men. She wore armor now, dark iron with that damned raven sigil blazing silver on her chest. In her hand, she held a blade that seemed to drink the torchlight. Leaving so soon, Your Majesty? Her smile was poison. And here I thought we could settle this like civilized wolves. Varen stepped in front of Senna, his sword raised. Your family murdered Queen Morrigan. You've been plotting this revenge for 3 centuries. Revenge? Morgaine laughed. This isn't revenge, boy. This is correction. Morrigan was a witch who corrupted the bloodline. My ancestors did what was necessary to save the kingdom. And now? Her eyes fixed on Senna with naked hatred. Now her spawn has crawled out of whatever hole she's been hiding in, and the corruption begins again. I'm not her spawn, Senna said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm a healer's apprentice from... You're her great-great-great-granddaughter. Morgaine's voice cracked like a whip. Did you think we wouldn't trace the bloodline? Morrigan had a daughter, hidden away, protected by loyalists who scattered to the far corners of the realm. Your grandmother was the last keeper of that secret. And now you stand here, touching artifacts that haven't responded to anyone in 300 years, bonding with the king, ready to put a witch back on the throne. Senna's world tilted, her grandmother's warnings, her mother's gift, the voice in her chest when she'd touched the crown. Finally. I've been waiting for you. It doesn't matter, Varen said coldly. She's my mate, she's my queen, and you're a traitor who's about to die. Bold words for a man outnumbered 12-1. Then let's improve the odds. Steel sang as Varen moved, faster than Senna could track, faster than should be possible. 2 of Morgaine's men fell before the others even drew their weapons, but 12 was still too many. Even for an alpha king. Senna watched in horror as they swarmed him, as blood bloomed on his arm, his side, as he fought like a demon, but the numbers kept pressing. Morgaine hung back, watching with satisfaction, waiting for the inevitable. No. The voice in Senna's chest roared to life. You have power. Use it. I don't know how, she whispered. You do. You've always known. Stop hiding. Senna thought about her grandmother, dying in a small cottage, making her promise to bury her gift. She thought about her mother, who she barely remembered, who had died when Senna was 3 and left nothing behind but stories. She thought about Varen, bleeding, fighting, and refusing to fall even as the odds crushed him. And she stopped hiding. Power erupted from her like a shockwave. Silver-white light blazed from her skin, from her eyes, from her outstretched hands. Morgaine's men flew backward, slamming into walls with bone-cracking force. The torches exploded. The blood seals on the vault doors flared crimson. When the light faded, only Morgaine remained standing. And barely. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people discover these tales. Witch, she spat, blood dripping from her nose. Just like her. Yes. Senna's voice echoed strangely, layered with something ancient. Just like her. She didn't remember crossing the distance, didn't remember raising her hand. But suddenly her palm pressed flat against Morghane's forehead, and visions poured through her. Not visions of the past, but of the future. Morghane on the throne, the kingdom burning, wolves slaughtered by the thousands, and at the end, a darkness so complete it swallowed the stars. "I see what you would have done," Senna whispered. "I see the world you would have built." "Get out of my head," Morghane screamed. "No." Senna pushed deeper, past the plans and the hatred, to the core of the woman's mind. She found the threads of treachery, the bribed guards, the poisoned loyalties, the escape routes and backup plans. And she pulled. Morghane collapsed, unconscious, her mind stripped bare. Senna swayed, the power draining from her as quickly as it had come. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. "I've got you." Varen's voice, rough with pain and wonder. "I've got you." "Your guards," she managed. "The ones she turned. Will be dealt with. Bronwyn's already moving." He pressed his forehead to hers and she felt his fear, his relief, and his awe bleeding through the bond. "You saved us." "I don't know what I did." "You were magnificent." She wanted to argue, to explain that she had no idea how to control whatever had just happened. But exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and the last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was Varen calling her name. Senna woke to sunlight and silence. She was in her chambers. She recognized the firs, the mountain view, the faint scent of rose oil that clung to everything. But something felt different, lighter, like a storm had passed and left the air clean. "You slept for 2 days." She turned her head. Varen sat in a chair beside her bed looking like he hadn't moved in all that time. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his arm was bandaged, but he was alive, whole. 2 days? Her voice came out as a croak. He handed her water, waiting while she drank. "The power you unleashed took everything you had. The healer said you nearly burned yourself out." His jaw tightened. "If you'd pushed any harder, you might have died." "But I didn't." "No." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You didn't." "What happened after I collapsed?" Bronwyn secured the keep. The guards Morghane turned have been arrested. Most of them were being blackmailed, family members held hostage at her estate in the eastern mountains. He paused. "We sent a force to retrieve them. They're safe now." "And Morghane?" "Alive. Imprisoned." A cold smile touched his lips. "Whatever you did to her mind, she hasn't stopped screaming. The healers say she's trapped in her own visions, seeing that future you pulled from her over and over again." Senna shuddered. She hadn't meant to do that, hadn't known she could. But some part of her, the part that whispered with Morrigan's voice, felt no remorse. "There's something else," Varen said carefully. "Something you need to see." He helped her stand, wrapping a robe around her shoulders when she shivered. Together, they walked through corridors that buzzed with activity. Servants repairing damage, guards in new livery that bore Varen's wolf sigil instead of the silver raven. Everyone they passed bowed, not to Varen, to her. "What did you tell them?" Senna whispered. "The truth. That you're Morrigan's heir. That you saved the kingdom. That the crown has chosen its queen." "I haven't agreed to be queen." "I know." He squeezed her hand. "But they needed hope, and you gave them that." They descended to the vault. The blood seals opened at Varen's touch. But when they stepped inside, Senna gasped. The artifacts were glowing. Every single one of them. The mirrors, the daggers, the rings, the bones, blazed with soft silver light. They pulsed in unison, a heartbeat that matched her own. And in the center of the room, hovering above its pedestal, waited the crown. "It's been doing this since you collapsed," Varen said quietly. "The court scholars are losing their minds. They say the artifacts haven't been this active since Morrigan herself wore the crown." Senna approached slowly, The crown's red stone pulsed faster as she drew near, eager, welcoming. "Put me on," the voice in her chest whispered. "Claim what's yours." "If I wear it," she said, "what happens?" "According to the old texts, you'll be able to access the full power of the bloodline, control the artifacts, see across the kingdom." Varin stood beside her, near enough that she could feel his warmth, but maintaining that careful distance. "You'll be queen in truth, not just name." "And if I don't?" "Then the artifacts go dormant again. The power sleeps until another heir is born." He paused. "And we lose the best chance this kingdom has had in 300 years. Senna stared at the crown. She thought about the girl she'd been a week ago. Tired, trapped, certain she'd spent her life hiding. She thought about her grandmother's warnings, her mother's secrets, the legacy she'd never asked for. She thought about Varin, about the bond singing between them, about his hands cradling her face in the observatory, about the look in his eyes when she'd saved his life. "If I do this," she said slowly, "it's not because of destiny. It's not because of Morrigan or the bloodline or 300 years of waiting." "Then why?" She turned to face him. "Because I choose to. Because this kingdom needs someone who understands what it's like to be powerless. Because," she took a breath, "because I want to stay. With you. And if that means wearing a crown and learning to control magic I don't understand, and being queen of a kingdom full of wolves, then I'll figure it out." Varen's eyes blazed. "Say that again." "Which part?" "The part where you want to stay." Senna smiled. The first real smile she'd allowed herself since this madness began. "I want to stay, Varen. I choose you. Not because the bond compels me, not because the crown chose me, but because you're the first person in my entire life who's given me a choice and meant it." He kissed her. Not desperate this time, not hungry. Slow and sweet and full of promise. His arms wrapped around her, and she felt the bond settle into something deeper, something permanent. Two halves of a whole finally coming together. When they parted, both breathing hard, the crown descended gently into Senna's waiting hands. She lifted it without hesitation. "Welcome home," the voice whispered. "Welcome home, granddaughter." The crown settled onto her head, and the world burst into light. She saw everything, every corner of the kingdom, every wolf and human and creature that lived within its borders. She felt the land itself, ancient and patient, welcoming her claim. The artifacts blazed brighter, their power flowing into her, through her, becoming part of her. When the light faded, she stood transformed. The crown no longer looked brutal. On her head, the iron thorns had softened into delicate spirals, the red stone blazing like a captured star. She wore power like a second skin, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of it. Varen dropped to one knee. "My queen," he said, and his voice held no irony, no reservation, only truth. Senna touched his face, tilting it up to meet her eyes. "Get up," she said softly. "Kings don't kneel to their mates." "This one does." But he rose anyway, a smile breaking across his face like dawn. "What now, Your Majesty?" Senna looked around the glowing vault, felt the bond humming between them, and heard the distant sounds of a kingdom beginning to heal. "Now," she said, "we finish what Morgane started. We find everyone she corrupted, everyone she threatened, and everyone she hurt. We make this kingdom safe." She took his hand. "And then we get married." Varen laughed, a real laugh, full and warm, the first she'd ever heard from him. "As my queen commands." 3 months later, Lady Morgane stood trial. The great hall, the same hall where Senna had first lifted the crown, was packed to the walls. Nobles, commoners, wolves from every corner of the kingdom had come to witness justice. Morgane looked nothing like the woman who'd led a coup. Her silver hair hung lank around a face gone hollow, her eyes vacant and haunted. Whatever Senna had done to her mind, she'd never fully recovered. She answered questions in fragments, confessing to crimes she seemed to barely remember committing. The evidence was overwhelming regardless. Bronwyn had recovered documents from Morgane's estate. 3 centuries of plotting, generation after generation working toward this moment. Bribed officials, murdered loyalists, and a web of corruption so vast it had taken weeks to untangle. The council's verdict was unanimous: guilty of treason, conspiracy, attempted regicide, and crimes against the crown. Morgane hanged at dawn. Senna didn't attend the execution. She'd seen enough of Morgane's darkness in those visions. She didn't need to watch it end. Instead, she spent that morning in the castle gardens, tending herbs she'd planted during her first week as queen. Some things, she'd decided, shouldn't change. She was still a healer at heart. She always would be. "You're getting dirt on your wedding robes." She looked up to find Bronwyn watching her with fond exasperation. "They'll wash. They're silk. Then they'll wash carefully." Senna sat back on her heels, brushing soil from her fingers. "Is it done?" "It's done." Bronwyn's weathered face softened. "The kingdom is safe, Your Majesty. Because of you." The title still felt strange on her shoulders, heavier than the crown somehow, but she was learning to carry it. "Because of all of us," Senna corrected. "I just happened to be the one who could touch glowing artifacts without passing out." Bronwyn snorted. "If that's how you want to remember it." She paused, something shifting in her expression. "The king is looking for you." "Something about final preparations?" Senna's heart skipped. "The ceremony isn't until sunset." "I'm aware. But you know how he gets." She did know. In 3 months, she'd learned everything about Varenne, his nightmares about the coup, his tendency to forget meals when he was working, and the way his whole face transformed when he laughed. She knew the sound of his heartbeat, the warmth of his presence through the bond, the particular way he said her name when he thought she wasn't listening. She knew she loved him, had known for weeks, maybe longer. She just hadn't said it yet. The ceremony chamber glowed with 1,000 candles. They'd chosen the observatory, their place where he'd first kissed her, where everything had truly begun. The glass dome revealed a sunset sky streaked with gold and crimson, and the first stars were already emerging, pale diamonds against the dying light. Varenne waited at the center of the room, dressed in formal black that made his eyes seem almost silver. When Senna entered, wearing a gown of deep blue silk, silver spirals embroidered along the hem to echo the crown's transformed design, he stopped breathing. "You look." He shook his head. "There aren't words." "Then don't use them." She crossed to him, taking both his hands in hers. The bond hummed between them, steady and sure, but beneath it she felt his nervousness. 3 months of waiting. 3 months of giving her space to choose, to be certain. "Before we do this," Senna said quietly, "I need to say something. Anything." That first night in the great hall, when I touched the crown and it lifted, I was terrified. I thought destiny had trapped me, that I lost control of my own life forever. She squeezed his hands. "And then, you gave me 7 days. You gave me choice when you could have demanded anything." "Senna, let me finish." She took a breath. "I spent my whole life hiding my gift, hiding my bloodline, hiding anything that might make me dangerous or different or seen. And you saw me anyway. Not the power, not the crown, not Morrigan's legacy. Me, the healer's apprentice who grew herbs and set bones and talked back to the Alpha King." Varenne's eyes glistened. "You were magnificent even then. I was terrified even then." She laughed softly. "But you made me feel safe. You made me feel chosen, not because of magic or destiny, but because you wanted me. Just me." "I did. I do." His voice roughened. "Senna, I've loved you since the moment you told me you'd rather not touch the crown. No one had ever refused me anything. And there you were, this exhausted, stubborn, impossibly brave woman, telling the Alpha King she'd rather not. In my defense, I didn't know you were the Alpha King." You wouldn't have cared if you did. Probably not. He laughed, pulling her closer. I love you, Senna. Not because the bond compels me, though it does. Not because you saved my kingdom, though you did. But because you're you. Stubborn and kind and powerful and real. You're the first person who's ever made me feel like I could be more than the crown I wear. I love you too. The words came easily now, natural as breathing. I think I have for weeks. I was just too scared to say it. And now? Now I'm ready. She rose on her toes, pressing her forehead to his. Make me your queen, Varen. Not for the kingdom. For us. The ceremony was simple. Words spoken beneath starlight. Blood mingled over ancient stone, the bond between them blazing bright as they promised themselves to each other. When Varen slid the ring onto her finger, iron and silver twisted together, a match to the transformed crown, Senna felt something settle into place. Not a chain, not a trap, a home. I present to you, Bronwyn's voice rang through the observatory, King Varen and Queen Senna of Valdrin. Bonded in blood, united in purpose, matched by destiny and choice alike. Cheers erupted from the crowd below. They'd open the castle gates, let the entire kingdom witness. Senna looked out at the sea of faces, at the people who'd accepted her despite her strange power, her common blood, her refusal to be anything other than herself. Varen pulled her close, his lips brushing her ear. Any regrets? Senna thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago, exhausted, hiding, and certain she'd never be free. That woman would never have believed this was possible. But this woman, Queen Senna, mate to the Alpha King, heir to Morrigan's power and her own choices alike, this woman knew better. Not a single one. He kissed her then, slow and sweet, as the stars blazed overhead and the kingdom celebrated below. She'd walked into that great hall expecting nothing more than another test to fail. Instead, she'd found a crown that chose her, a king who loved her, and a power that was finally, truly hers. No woman could lift the cursed crown, they'd said. But Senna had never been just any woman. And as she stood in her mate's arms, wearing iron that had softened for her touch, ruling a kingdom that had become her home, she finally understood what her grandmother had been protecting all along. Not a curse, a birthright. And she would wear it well.